You guys see it?
Yeah, I can hear you, see your screen good. So I'll just start. Okay, it's recording. So welcome everybody to Pardot Specialist Bootcamp June 2020. And we are on day 3. We have Jen with us. And I'll just introduce brief of myself. I'm Isha Garg, leading New Delhi B2B Marketers Group. And we have a joint meetup with Prashant Gandhi, who is leading Delhi Pardot User Group. Prashant, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Isha. Welcome everyone to this session of ours today, where Jen will be sharing some insights on Pardot today. And I'm Prashant Gandhi. I lead the Delhi Pardot User Group, and I'm a Pardot consultant working with TechMatrix Consulting over here. I think it's over to you, Jen.
Yeah, we welcome you, Jen, for our session. So it will be good if you introduce everybody about yourself. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, everybody. I'm covering day 3. My focus is going to be on lead management. And so basically, I'm a Pardot consultant. I live in the United States. I live in the state of Minnesota, so it's right in the middle of the United States. It's called the Midwest. And I'm a Pardot consultant, and that means I focus on marketing automation. So I spend all my time in Pardot and Salesforce, and that's all I do. So Isha invited me to connect with you guys, and I thought it was a great opportunity. I'm also the B2B Marketing User Group leader for Minneapolis area. So I kind of do what Isha does in my area as well. Lead management is a big area. When I looked at the list, and if you're taking the exam, it's probably one of the most important spots because I think this holds a lot of the key functionality. So right now I'm planning to use the full 90 minutes. So if you think this was going to be a quick one, I would say that I'm using the full time because I want to make sure that you guys fully understand all the aspects and are either prepared for your exam, or maybe you're just doing this to get better use of your Pardot. So I'm going to be, again, talking about it and going through some examples as well. Now, 90 minutes is a long time. So to keep things interesting, I did include 6 quiz questions. And so we're going to use the chat. We'll try the first one and hopefully it works well. But when I get to these multiple choice quiz questions, the first person to reply in the chat, whoever gets it right, I'll write their name down. And there's 6 questions. And so basically I'll do a drawing on the 6 people that answered, and whoever wins can get it's actually a free voucher to take an exam. And I read the fine print. It looks like it was worth the full cost of the voucher or the full cost of the exam, which the last time I took it was about $170. So if you're thinking about taking the exam, you can be active on answering those questions. And, if you can answer as many as you want, and if you get your name in more times, that just increases your odds. So like I said, I'm doing that so that all the quiz questions are on the material so that you stay engaged and you pay attention. And I'm hoping that also will help you get better. I also took this exam. I'm a Pardot consultant, so I do have the specialist. I've got the certification for the specialist, and I also have the consulting exam as well. So I've been in your shoes. I've done this before. And as a bonus, on the back of my slides, I also just took screen prints of the Pardot system. And some of you might be in the same spot where you don't have access to Pardot, and it's really hard to take an exam when you don't have access. And so I won't go through those slides, but if Isha wants to share the deck, just know that in the back, I put about 10 or 12 slides of just, screenshots of the software system itself, so that when you're learning about page actions, you can kind of see what the screen looks like. I found that to be very helpful as well. All right, that's enough of the introductions. Let's get started. So like I said, I'm focusing on the lead management section. And basically, I'm going to explain the components and use cases of an automation rule. So each of these bullet points are what's defined in the lead management section. Here's the catch. What's in red, because there's a lot to cover here. And so what's in red is going to be covered tomorrow. And that's with Andrea Terrell. She's going to cover the items in red. I'm covering the aspects in black. And I did that just again so we had more time to actually focus on those activities and get a better understanding of it. She had more capacity. She only had fewer bullet points. And so those two actually made the sense to cover in email marketing. And so, like I said, when you're doing this, these are truly under lead management, but the red points will be covered tomorrow. So stay tuned for tomorrow, and hope you log in then as well. Now, if you have questions, I think you can put it in chat, but for the most part, we'll probably review those questions at the end. I'm actually going to be kind of in presentation mode, and I just noticed that I don't actually see the chat as it's not as easy to see it. So actually, let me think here. Here we go, the chat. I'll try to keep that. So we'll be using those for quiz questions. So I'll try to keep that down here, and let me see what happens if I go to presentation mode, if I lose my chat. Oh no, there it stays. Perfect. Awesome. Automation rules. Right out of the bat, we're going to cover automation rules. This is a fun topic. I think it's one of the most critical components and features of Pardot. It actually does a lot of the heavy lifting. So what's an automation rule? So before I get into the details, I actually like this slide because it talks about the difference between an automation rule and the difference between just email marketing. A lot of people use, there's many platforms. The last I looked, I think there's 60 or 70 different email marketing platforms. Pardot is one. There's Marketo, MailChimp, HubSpot. There's all these different kinds of marketing platforms as well. And some are better used for email marketing, and some of them are better for marketing automation. And the difference is here is email marketing, basically, that's engaging with mass audience with emails. Something like MailChimp is a great tool for that because you're basically sending lots of emails out and then you're measuring opens and clicks. And things like that are email blasts, newsletters, holiday promotions, holiday cards. Those are good examples of email marketing. Our marketing automation, basically that's streamlining certain tasks across a variety of entities like email, website, salespeople. So an example of marketing automation is like, hey, a prospect fills out a form on your website, then a salesperson is notified, that salesperson calls a prospect, and that prospect is created as a lead in Salesforce and added to a specific email nurture drip. So you can see the example of email marketing is a lot more robust. It's much more than just sending an email. And sending an email is actually a component of marketing automation, but marketing automation is much more than that. It encompasses many more people and many more different products and systems. And that's why I'm talking about automation rules. So you actually need automation rules to do marketing automation. And that's one of the things that makes Pardot shine, what differentiates it from a lot of the other platforms. Here's what it looks like in Pardot. So like all my screenshots are going to be with the Lightning version. If you're still in Classic, I encourage you to make the switch and get over into Lightning. But here's just what it looks like. So when I'm in Pardot for Lightning, I'm on the automation tab, and it's right here to the left under automation rules. And automation rules, like I said, they're the heavy lifters of the Pardot toolbox. They're powerful and flexible. They're the most comprehensive, comprehensive automation tool offered by Pardot. It allows you to perform many different tasks. Two key things is an automation rule, and that's fourth bullet point is really important. It's going to continuously look for prospects who match rule criteria. So here's an example of an automation rule. Let's just say that I'm trying to change a field. So anyone with a lead source or anyone that has a webinar ID, I want to change the lead source to, webinar. That I can do with an automation rule. And so what I do is when I actually go through that automation rule and enter that automation rule is going to run continuously. It's constantly going to be looking to see, hey, is there a webinar ID number? If there is, then I'm going to change the lead source to webinar. You can set that up and it's going to run continuously. It's also retroactive. So for instance, let's just say that webinar happened 2 months ago. So if I create the automation rule right now and say, hey, anyone who has a webinar ID, I want to change that lead status to webinar, I'm going to create that automation rule. The system, it doesn't care if that happened yesterday or a year ago. it's going to apply that rule regardless of time, unless you put a timing parameter around it. Let's keep talking about it. Automation rules, they're built from criteria and actions, and that'll make more sense when we kind of walk through a quick example here. I have screenshots of an example. And the criteria is with, basically after you've considered your criteria, you can use what's called a match any or a match all. A match any is kind of like an or function, and a match all is like an and function. So here's what it looks like when I say, hey, I want to create an automation rule. You're going to click automation rule, create new, and what you're going to see is, this is what I mean. Your match all is kind of an and function, and your match any is an or. And you actually just click on here, add new rule. So this is going to be kind of your criteria section. So what are your criteria? And then your action section below is basically, well, now what do you want to do with that? We also have this execute in real time. And basically, this is something that you can check if you actually want that automation rule to run instantly. Otherwise, an automation rule will run kind of every 10 minutes. So I actually just like to show that, because sometimes it's just good to know what all the little buttons and features are around you so you actually can understand that. Here's a little more explanation around match all. So again, if you're trying to do something with an and function, so let's just say I'm saying I would like to see anybody who's from California and New York. So let's say if I wanted to create an automation rule, so let's just say I'm going to make a list, and I'm going to create a list for everyone who is from the state of California and who's also from, you know, or has a, actually I say not from, but has a location. So let's just say anyone who has a business in California and in New York, I want to put them on a list, because maybe there's some kind of certain rules that are important for those states. And so anyone who has an office in those states, I want to email them and communicate them. So that's when you would use like, it needs to be and. So it would be only those people that have locations in both of those states. So it's a smaller subset. It's the blue in between. Or basically allows it to be either or. So like you said, if you wanted to use the or function, that's anyone who's got an office, anyone who has an office in California, or anyone who has an office in New York. So it's basically not both, but either one, and that's when you get the or. So you can see the difference between using the and or, and like you said, and the area that it covers. So here's an example of actually filling one out. So with the automation rule, I've said in this example, I've picked all, match all, and that's for the and function. So it's basically anyone who is in the industry apparel, and so you can see when I click match all, this and shows up, and anyone who is in the state of Hawaii. So this is going to be an automation rule that's going to match on anyone who has both of those criteria fulfilled, and they must have both of the criteria fulfilled for it actually to be populated. It's using the and function. There's also rule groups. So you can see within an automation rule, rules can be created by adding a new rule group, and that's actually, you can see these buttons down below, and that shows up on the automation rule. They're going to allow you to construct combinations of criteria while reducing the restriction of. So the reason you use rule groups actually is it helps reduce, it helps you so you don't have to go, put one, it allows you to group it. So you don't have to have one automation rule, then you have to and another one, and another one, and another one. So you're actually able to say, okay, these are all very similar. I'm going to group them, and that way I can just list them. So it's a great functionality that you can use within automation rules, especially I tend to use it for free emails. So let's just say I'm creating a suppression list on anyone who has a Gmail or a Yahoo or AOL. Otherwise, I would have to create a line each time. But instead, with a rule group, and you can see below here, I can say, hey, I'm just going to add a rule. And then in the field at the end here, I can actually just use semicolons and separate them and add all of them together. Put them on one line instead of creating a line for each one. So it helps kind of reduce your workload. And it gives you more flexibility. So then let's talk about the actions. So once you've created the rule, and we'll go back to it here. So we've said, okay, anyone who's in the industry apparel, and if they're in the state of Hawaii. So those are my match criteria, and you can see the actions is below. Then you have to decide, well, what do I want to do with that? What's my automation rule actually doing for me? There's a long list of them. And you can see under actions here, under this list, I just hit the drop down, and there was all the, many to choose from. And you could see if this was actually live, I could actually pull the scroll bar down, and I could see many more. So there's quite a bit of functionality. I actually listed them out here. And here's the comprehensive list. So you can see, there's a lot of functionality. So with automation rules, you can actually add that prospect to a list. You can add the prospect to a Salesforce campaign or adjust the prospect score. There's a lot of different things that you can do with an automation rule. Some of these I think get used more than others. And also you will find that just kind of depending on how your company operates, when you're using campaigns a lot, you're going to use a lot of different rules to, like, I think a real popular one is send to Salesforce campaign. Because, when you're engaging with those campaigns and making sure those are populated, that's an easy one to pick as well. It really will depend on your company. I actually included this article down here. So again, like if you want more information, I put this in here. A lot of my information I'm getting from a variety of different Trailhead or Salesforce documentations or some blogs that I know that, that I follow, and they had some good information on them as well. So I'm kind of pulling it from all these different places. One thing that's good to note as well is executing in real time. So again, we talked about that as well. There's at the bottom, you could actually execute in real time, which means that that box is checked. It's going to happen instantly. And sometimes that's important because in the order that that automation rule executes is important. And sometimes you need them to automate to happen instantly. There's actually some dialogue here. They recommend to keep that disabled because it could cause slower load times. There's also a function that's called repeat, and that allows automation rules to have a repeat functionality. And that allows a user to determine if the automation rule should be allowed to match a prospect more than once. So let's just take scoring. So let's just say you have an automation rule that says, okay, anytime a prospect hits 100, I want them to there's some activity, you want to maybe add them to a nurture of some type. But then let's just say that prospect gets quiet, and you've got scoring rules so that when there's less activity, his score starts to degrade and go down. And so maybe that's specified. So after a year and a half, that prospect score, he became inactive and he went down again, but now something changed in his business and he's engaging again with you. So something like scoring is an area where you might want to have that repeat rule because maybe that score changes and all of a sudden that prospect becomes qualified again. And now that you want that prospect to be considered to match the criteria and also then execute on any actions that you've specified for that automation rule. And so that's an example of why and when you would use the repeat example. And I guess I have an example here at the bottom, but I just made one up on the fly. But let's see here. Yep, and here's an example. I think I've kind of already talked about one, but here's one. And literally, I think I added this example just because I did this literally this week. So I actually needed to create an automation rule, and I did basically any prospect who attended a webinar, I needed to add them to a webinar list. And so what I did is I went and I created using the AND function. So I used the automation rule criteria for any prospect who attended a webinar and the create date equaled today. Then I changed that lead source to webinar. Oh, sorry. Yeah, these are different examples here. Sorry about that. Yep, so here's some different examples of when I used an automation rule. So I added them to a list. Sometimes I needed to change the date or lead source to webinar. Or any prospect who has a score of 40, I had to sign versus via Salesforce assignment rule. So again, these were 3 examples of just something that I did this week. And like I said, there's more that you can follow along here. And I provided an article I thought was helpful that gave many different examples of practicing. I thought the Trailhead was also really helpful. So if you're new to it, I think kind of going through the Trailhead, reading the document, and then following these slides again, if they're dispersed, will help you kind of walk through that a little bit better. Okay, so let's talk about segmentation rules. So segmentation rules is another kind of automation rule within Pardot. So it's in Pardot, you have automation rules, like I said, and those are actually doing some kind of action. You define the criteria, and then there's some kind of action that happens. Segmentation rules is actually just a one-time, I'm going to like group people together for you. And so it's basically, think of ways and times where you're like, I just need to know how many people you know, attended an event last year. And so then basically you can just create a one-time segmentation rule, pull that into a list, and you're done. So that's an example on the difference of a segmentation rule. So segmentation rules are used to create a list of prospects to apply to any type of segmentation action based on any specific criteria. So unlike automation rules, segmentation rules don't run continuously. That's actually kind of a very important point. So an automation rule, once you create it, it's going to continuously run, and it's going to continuously qualify and you know, match criteria, and then execute that action behind it. Where a segmentation rule basically runs one time. You create it, it takes, you know, 5 minutes, and it'll populate, and then it's done. So it's kind of a key point. And I would say that's something that you would definitely, if there's a time where you want to actually write a note to make sure you know those differences, I think that's an important piece of information. And I remember it actually coming up, you know, they tested that knowledge in a variety of different ways. I don't remember if it was the specialist, but I know it definitely comes up on a consultant exam as well. So when I'm in Pardot Lightning, or yes, I'm in the Pardot Lightning, here's where segmentation rules. So it's a little different. It's under the prospects tab, and then you're under segmentation. And this is where you can actually add a segmentation rule. And so when you click on that, it actually then will add, you know, you basically then can create your segmentation rule, and here's what it looks like. Here's an example. I think I just had one example. It just said, I want to do a segmentation rule for any email that contains Yahoo, Gmail, or AOL. So those are basically examples of free emails. And what I want to do with them, I'm going to remove them from my list. So let's just say that maybe this Adobe contacts list is an important list. There's a lot of people on it. And so I want to take off anyone who has Yahoo, Gmail, or AOL. So here's my criteria, and here's my actions. One key thing is here is the values are actually separated by semicolons. So that's one thing that's different with Pardot. Sometimes honestly, I still today sometimes actually have to pause and think, is it commas or semicolons? But it's actually semicolons. And so it's an important thing to work on. Oh, here's an example of a segmentation rule using the OR. So here, you know, you can see it looks a lot like an automation rule. So they've streamlined it so like the screens look similar, but I'm actually truly sitting here in a segmentation rule. And so here's where, you know, prospect country is Canada, or is from Mexico. You can add to a CRM campaign. So the list is much shorter in terms of different things you can do. So you can add to a prospect list. So these are the different actions you can do. You can add them to a Salesforce campaign, you know, apply tags, remove prospect from a list, and remove tags. So if you remember when we were doing automation rule, there was a lot more. I think there was like 25, or maybe even just close to 30 different things. So segmentation rule had a lot fewer choices. And like I said, the big difference here is an automation rule is something that kind of runs continuously, and your segmentation rule is something that just runs one time. Here's something to note as well, because I remember when I was getting started, I used to get tripped up on this. Custom fields are ones that you create. They're specific to your business. So for instance, here's a prospect custom field. And I think I just made this up. Imagine, is that, so if you have a custom field, you actually in the drop down actually we'll have to pick custom field. And then this is probably an example of like your custom field that you created specific for your time. So let's just pretend you were doing an event or a trade show, and maybe you had something that people could sign up for. And here, you know, they signed up for early. If you have a default field, default fields are the same for everyone. And there's things like a job title or email or country or company or industry, and those are all the same. I just remember the first time I was creating an automation rule, I was looking for my custom field. So I was looking for it like right next to email, country, company, where's custom field? And I realized, oh, it's prospect custom field. And then from within the custom fields, then I actually find the name of my field. So again, just something to think about if you were doing it for the first time. All right. And let's see where I'm at. Choosing the right automation rule. Okay, here's also a really important section. So when you're choosing the appropriate automation tool for your needs, you can simplify your marketing efforts. So here's one way to look at it. So here's kind of a tree. I did not create this. This actually is coming from Salesforce documentation. But, you know, so here's, and again, and some of this criteria you're going to be covering with Andrea. So what I'm recommending is we're going to go through this, and you might not be familiar with a dynamic list yet, but once you go through tomorrow's subject, good to come back and review this as well. But the rule criteria, here's kind of a tree that helps you understand which to use in the kind of the automation rule section. So is the rule based on a criteria or action the prospect takes? If it's an action, simply use a completion action. You'll be going to be discussing those tomorrow. If it's a criteria, go to step 2. So I've been going through automation rules and segmentations. Both of them have criteria. So from here, I'm going to go to step 2. Is it a one-time automation? Yes. So that's what we talked about with the segmentation. If you're just going to do something one time, like I just need to know how many prospects went to a holiday party. I just need right now to know how many prospects are in the industry of telecommunications, and I just need it to know it right now. I'm not going to need to do it on a continuous basis. That's when you use a segmentation rule. If you say, no, I need to know this because I want this set up on a regular recurring basis, then I'd go to step 3, and it says, what's the goal? If it's simply to update a list, use your dynamic list, which you'll talk about tomorrow. And if it's the action is based on criteria, you'll want to use an automation rule. So this is a slide that you want to take a screenshot of and then use it going forward. Here's a visual representation of it, and I also included the link in here for yourself. Again, this is not, I didn't create it, it's off Salesforce, but I think it's good to know or start to understand it as a specialist. And if you decide to take it further into consultant, I definitely know that there's going to be a lot of questions on being able to choose the right one. So that's really important. Let's just take a look quick at the questions. Wow, look at all that. Let's see here if I can. I'm not sure if I can get to all of these. Wow, engaging group. I wish I could take a copy of all this. How many times is a prospect? Let me just do, I'll do a couple of them. How many times a prospect is screened by an automation rule? It'll be continuously. So an automation rule consistently runs. What does retroactive mean? That means it can go back in time, meaning it doesn't matter when something happens. So meaning if your prospect did a certain activity 2 years ago, and if it's in your database, it's still going to go back and look at that, even though the actions already happened in the past. Whereas a segmentation is like, it's going to take a snapshot of it like right now based on what's in the system. Depending on using depend if you're using a repeat rule, then you can mark there. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can we have access to the sessions? That's, yep, got it. Yep, thank you. And I see that historical data is another way of, so your teammates or your attendees also answering your retroactive. So thanks for answering that. Cool. And we're going to try our first chat question here. So this is my first quiz question. So I'm going to watch the chat to see automation rules. Do they, just you can type the letter, do they run continuously? Can they only run rules one time? they retroactive, or D, are they A and C? So I'm going to watch who wants to, can you either, the first one to answer that with A, B, C, or D? What do you guys think? We talked about this topic. Here, where am I at? Maybe I gotta be at the bottom. Look at that, I love the engagement. D is correct, so awesome. Everyone who got D, you killed it. But I'm gonna write this name down here, so I'm the DIK, so DIK.
That's Diksha Gambhir, I guess.
Thank you, I just don't even want. Okay, so your name is, well, you now, so again, there's going to be 6 questions. I'm going to do another question, so this was kind of practice. So then I'm going to hit next. And so Diksha, I'm here, sorry, I have pronunciation. So I'm going to, you're basically you got 1 chance at getting a free voucher. So now I'm going to do the next, now we'll do the next one. Here's the next quiz question. Why use a rule group? Does it keep the Pardot system clean? Allow users to combine, oops, let's get this down. Allow users to combine multi-part rules. Does it make it easier for users to update automation rules? And it provides more functionality. So what do you guys think the answer is there? And so I kind of like,
we have various answers coming up.
Lots of answers. The only problem is that I don't know where the stop is from the last answer.
So Diksha again started the loop once again, because
Okay.
last was like Azhar answered like B is applicable for segmentation rules. And then I
Awesome.
believe, yeah.
All right, Diksha, then you got the correct answer, because the correct answer is allow users to combine multi-part rules. So that is B. Okay, Diksha, you're killing it. So let's just talk about that before, because it's really about learning here. And I think actually a lot of you have that answer correct. So I see tons and tons of Bs. Hey, Isha, can you just post something in there so now we know when it stops, so that when we have the next quiz, then because as I scroll, so we're very confident on when just there you go. Thank you. So now you know that you're starting it. Awesome. So got to learn. I haven't never done it this way, but so let's just make sure you get many people got the right answer. But why use a rule group? Basically, it's meant to be easier. It allows you to combine multi-part rules that would have previously been 2 separate rules. So it's a feature that makes it a little more convenient. And it's not just convenient, it makes it easier to read it. And then when it's easier to read it, then there's less chance of making mistakes. So the rule group, once you start to use, get into using automation rules more frequently, it becomes very convenient and helps you quite a bit. Okay, let's talk about scoring and grading. So I'll just do a quick time check here. So I think we're in good shape. Actually, I think we're in great shape. So I'll chill out a little bit. I always want to make sure we get through all the material. All right, scoring and grading. Why do you do scoring and grading? One of the big reasons is because of this. As you guys become marketers and you start getting really good and you're engaging contact, you have engaging content, you're emailing it out, and all of a sudden you're bringing more and more leads in, what happens is that your sales team can get overwhelmed. And what happens is that, this is literally, I had a client and this happened to them. At this point, they had 1 salesperson. It was their BDR. And some days there would be 500 leads that would come in, and she'd be like, I can't do 500 leads. Like I can work pretty hard, but it's not reasonable. How am I going to manage calling 500 leads? And that's when we started to talk about, well, we should be scoring these. We should be doing some things so that you know which ones are higher priority and which ones you should be calling first. So that's usually when you get to that situation where you've got salespeople that are overwhelmed, or it could be a situation as well where, your salespeople you're sending leads over and they're like, well, these aren't very good. Well, when you have something like a scoring or a grading, it allows you to get for people to make priorities, and they can start to see, okay, this is probably one I need to call more urgently. This one I can follow up with when I have time. So scoring is assigning points to each of your marketing activities. Each marketing activity is worth a certain amount of points. And you set scores to measure engagement of your prospects. So examples of scoring are opening an email, clicking an email, submitting a form, going to a web page. So it's a variety of different things. It's, you know, but what I want to say, it's activity. So scoring means that, and what's awesome about Pardot is that scoring is already set up. I know I have some experience with Marketo, and basically as soon as you get Marketo, you actually have to sit down and set up all your scoring. You actually have to go, okay, I'm going to make this activity worth this many points. You actually have to go in and set it up. And what's nice about Pardot is it's already set up out of the box. So literally you send your first email and it's already there. And so that's really convenient. So here's where it is. Scoring is in Pardot settings. And you can see here under automation settings, it's scoring. And this is basically what it looks like when you go to the page. Here's the list of all the different scoring rules. And I believe this is pretty close to out of the box. There may have been some changes with this, but here's a better comprehensive, and this is kind of taking out of the Salesforce documentation. Here's all the different activities, and here's what happens where you provide points. So you can start to see there's some catches your eyes here. A form submission or a form handler submission is worth 50 points. And so, and that makes a lot of sense, because if you have a prospect fill out a form, the first thing that happens is, you know, that's a pretty strong signal, right? Because if someone's filling out a form, they're providing some kind of their name, their email, and that's a pretty strong action. So that would get a lot of points. You can see there's not a lot of points on clicking. So like a web page view only gets 1 point. You know, if they click, a third-party click or a tracker link click is only worth 3 points. And I can see that because if there's an email sent and there's a click, you don't necessarily need a salesperson calling that person right away because they clicked on an email. That's no big deal. They might have just found something that was interesting. But this is an example of what's coming out of the box. One that I tend to see is one of my first questions is like, do you guys do webinars? Because you can see that webinar activity doesn't have any points. And so that's usually an area where I would be, you know, adding points or making changes to kind of what's out of the box. Same with, you can see every company is a little different. It all depends as well as what your score is in terms of what score do you actually, you have to actually should have a discussion with your marketing and sales team to decide, hey, obviously more points means more engagement. And what, is there a certain point or threshold where we should actually send that prospect or activity to salespeople? And so those are kind of some of the discussions that you should have with your team when you consider scoring. But the act of scoring is assigning points for each of your marketing activities, and each activity is worth a certain amount of points. So you can modify Pardot's point by, you know, to suit your business. And so here's the screen of what it looks like. So when you actually go into it, you can actually edit it and actually tailor the scores to fit your company's idea of what marketing quality looks like. Like I said, literally I'm working with a client, they use 40 points for a form submission. I don't know why, but for some reason, you know, based on their methodology and the way they work and the way they interact with sales, you know, they've changed what was the standard Pardot out of the box scoring. And this is an example of where you would go just to edit those scoring rules. And also here's a quick note, if you actually need to reduce points, you would just use a negative number. And you can remember that I think we saw some negative numbers in here. So for instance, if an opportunity was lost and a name is attached to that, that actually would reduce by 100 points. So, you know, you can go both ways with that. I wanted to just bring your attention to this, that changing the scoring rules is retroactive and rescores all prospects. And rescoring causes prospects to resync with the CRM and can affect score-based automations. I think this is just an important enough point. I don't know if this is on your test, but as you work with Pardot, I just think it should be on anybody's radar, because what happens is that I always tell people, like, first of all, we usually use the out of the box scoring just to get started. If you're working with a company who's never done scoring before, using what's provided is a good place to start. But now let's just say you get a year in and you guys go, hey, now we're going to change our scoring. And that's completely fine, but you just need to be careful, because if, for instance, all of a sudden you say clicks used to only be worth 3 points, and now I want them to be worth 30 points, just use an extreme example. When you change that scoring, it's literally, the system's going to go back and look at all the clicks that happened in your system and give them 30 points. And if you happen to have an automation role that's based on a score, so sometimes it's very common to say, hey, if a score reaches, 50 points, then there's an action behind it. You just want to make sure maybe you're turning off those automation roles, or you're modifying. You want to make sure you go and edit those automation roles, because the system's going to go back and rethink and redo everything for that. So something to be very careful of. It's a good tool. Scoring categories is something, I'm not sure it's stressed, but I think it's fine on the specialist exam just to be familiar with it. It's when you score a prospect on basically a product or a business unit. So you can assign a scoring category to a folder. So for instance, let's just say you have 2 product lines. Let's just say you have product and you have services. So there's 2 different divisions within your group. You can do is you can create a category. So you can put all your assets for your products in one folder, and you can put all your assets, marketing assets, in your services folder. And then basically when you create these 2 categories that are based off folders, as people engage with it, you can actually get a secondary score based on the category. So if someone's really active in services, all of a sudden now, of course, they'll start separating. So instead of just getting a blanket score that's like, oh, I'm clicking on stuff. Okay, well, that's interesting, but what are you clicking on? You can start break it out. You can say, okay, I've got people that are clicking on services a lot. So then their scoring category is going to get more points. And then basically you can do different things with that, of course. So you can start adding them to engagement drips. You can add them to, you can run automation roles on it. There's a variety of different things you can do. But scoring categories allows you to do things based on certain, on certain criteria. Here's how you create a scoring category. You can just create a name. I just hit DD. I just put something, but here's the name. Like I said, if I created products could be an example, or services. And then you basically assign it to certain folders. So here's an example where you can add variety of folders. So here's where I could add my products folder or my services folder, either one, and then it would create a scoring category after it. So this is the steps to do that. So far, we've been talking about scoring, and that's basically prospects' actions. What are things that prospects are doing, like their actions, right? They're actively clicking on something. They're actively submitting a form. They're actively viewing a page. Those are all examples of actions. They're going to your website. Those are actions, all things that you can get scores off of. Grading is something different. Grading is basically when you're looking at prospect attributes. Examples of grading are things like, okay, here's 100 companies. What industries are they in? Because maybe you want to focus on certain industries because you've been in business long enough and you're like, oh my gosh, we do so much business with the construction industry. That's growing for us. So you want to start paying attention. Maybe you want to do something different if you have a prospect that's coming from a hot industry. Or it might be a certain company size. Maybe you've decided, hey, we're working with medium-sized companies. Not really big ones, doesn't work for us. We're not that big, and maybe not too small because the smaller ones are not really worth their time. So you've got an industry size. And this is where you can start to use grading. It's starting to look at your prospects' attributes. So prospects are graded based on profiles, and profiles use criteria that you choose to determine how good of a fit a prospect is for your company. So do you remember when I said at the beginning when we had this person who's like, I'm completely overwhelmed. How do I decide which ones are important? Scoring tells you who's active today, who's actively looking at my emails, who's actively on our website doing things. But grading is also important too, because you might have a student. There might be someone from the university and he's just a student researching, so he's doing all this activities, but then you look at the grading, you're like, oh, it's actually a student. You know what, I'm gonna put that to the side. I'm really focused on management of a certain level, like I said, or industry, or maybe a certain geography. So those are all examples of grading. So like I said, grading, you know, there is just a default profile in the system right now, but you know, what you need to do is you actually, when you start to go, yes, I want to start to do some grading, you actually need to create a profile. And you can set the criteria such as location, company size, job titles. Maybe you tend to work with, you know, we always work with a director or vice president level, or maybe it needs to be CEO. You know, you would basically kind of sit down with your sales team and determine what are the characteristics of the grade. So once you start to kind of define what that ideal prospect looks like, then you start to match the criteria to meet your business needs. And you start to create a scale. So like you might say something like vice president is really good. So anyone who's got a certain profile criteria, I want to give them an A+ grade. And the grades go all the way down to F. So the range is an A+ to an F. I think the default is when someone just gets started, they're actually, if there's assigned to a certain profile, they're assigned the level of a D, and then, you know, you're looking at criteria or other criteria to see if their score actually improves. So each grade is 1/3 of a letter grade. And here's where it looks like in Pardot Lightning. If you're in prospect and you go into profiles, you can actually click here and you can just say add profile, because you can see the default is here. So this account doesn't have any profiles. There's just a default one that everyone gets. And like I said, here's just some considerations. Prospects are assigned a grade of D when they convert. So when you have somebody fills out a form and they convert, everyone's just assigned a grade D. And then you're basically going through automations to actually to determine if there actually should be increased or decreased from there. Automation rule is a common way to match an unmatched criteria. And basically, you also can manually change a profile criteria on a prospect record to match. And that's where I think the system, they use kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down. So like I said, there's a couple of different ways. Like what it's really, the grading is about identifying who you want to target. And then once you've identified that, then you're creating kind of a scale so that you can kind of, it's a way to determine which one's really good, which one's okay, and which one's like, you know what, maybe when we get to it and when we have time, we can kind of look into it further. So you create kind of this grading scale based on criteria. You're going to use automation roles to move those and match those profiles. There's also a way to manually do it as well. And here's what it looks like in the system. If you're under prospects and if you're in profile, you can see there's, and I think this is just like out of the box example. So like criteria is location, and you can actually match it with like these is either thumbs up or thumbs down to select the appropriate grade. Oh, I'm almost there. So it's about quiz time. I like having quizzes because I don't have to talk the whole time. It's so hard to give these. Oh, here's a couple questions. Can we tag the scoring to the performance of the marketer sales teams? Can we tag the scoring? These are default scores to the, no. So the scoring is all based on the performance of the prospect. So again, the prospect is someone that you're targeting. It's not off the sales team. Let's see here. Yep, example, opportunity lessons give points. Maybe it looks like I'm answering questions, but you guys are answering your own questions. Is scoring retroactive feature? As far as I can understand it, it is, I would say yes. And can grading be taken care of in segmentation? I would say I would not do grading. That's why I would use automation rules. Because remember, one of the features is that automation rule is running continuously. And so that's what you want, that kind of functionality, because what's going to happen is that you're going to move forward in time, and prospects, the idea is that you set up a grade and a profile, then you set up an automation role. So as prospects are added, and this is where having good data really matters, because as you populate your industry field and then your job title field correctly, you're going to be able to then run an automation rule on a continuous basis, and those grades are going to be constantly modified. And so that's why a segmentation rule is really more of kind of just a one-time thing that you're going to run just this one time, whereas grading is an example. It's just like scoring. You're going to want to have that run continuously. So an automation rule is a much better fit for that. Okay, everyone, I'm going to flip to the question, and we're going to see if someone else besides Diksha answers. All right, which is an example of scoring?
And that's crazy. We love the audience.
Diksha, like I swear to God, Diksha, you did not see the quiz questions in advance.
She's got
very
the cheat sheet, I believe.
Yeah. I love seeing everybody's answers, but I think people are getting it though. So that just helps me. Like, I think you guys understand it, right? Scoring, it's clicking or it's a form submission. You know, saying that a corporate headquarters based off a location in Florida, that's a good example of a grade. So the correct answer is D, it's B and C, and that's Diksha. Killing it. All right, so just like the last time, I'll do another quiz. I have one other quiz question, so I'm going to hit forward. I'm going to get so make sure we're, yep. Oh, thank you, Isha. Thanks for doing that to make sure we catch the, oh, wait, didn't I? Oh yeah, here's quiz 4. This is a little harder. All right, so the correct answer is A. Awesome, we got Vikesh. Vikesh?
Yeah, it's Vikesh.
So the first person I see is Vikesh. Yeah, thank you. And so let's go. And I see a lot of people are answering correctly here as well. Which of the following is true? And the correct answer is A. Grading is from A+ to F. Why is B? Prospects are assigned C when they convert. The actual answer is a D. So based out of the basics, the way it works in Pardot is upon conversion, they're automatically assigned a grade of D. And I just put C just to trip you up. All prospects are sorted with a custom profile until they are assigned a different one. That's not correct. They're all assigned a default profile until, unless you actually create a custom profile. And you cannot manually change the profile criteria. And the truth is you actually can. And we saw that slide with the thumbs up or the thumbs down. So cool. I'm going to do a time check on here. I'm doing really well. So I have one more section. So we're going to cover, I think it was page actions. So there's two other topics, and then there'll be 2 more quiz questions. So we're doing well. So it seems like we're covering about a half an hour. Actually, this section will probably go a little quicker. Okay, page actions. Okay, so page actions are completion actions that are triggered by a prospect's page views. So you can apply a page action to any page that on your website that contains your Pardot tracking code. So for instance, here's a screenshot of my website. Okay, I don't have Pardot, so I'm not using it personally for my business. But what I could do as a page action is I could create, if I put the tracking code on my website, and if a prospect who is cookied, and a prospect, if you remember earlier, if you talked to someone from day one, what's the difference between a prospect and a visitor? If you remember, a prospect is someone who has an email, so that they've probably filled a form submission, so they have an email and they are cookied. So what happens is that if I have the Pardot tracking code on my website, and a prospect who I have their email and their cookie goes to my website and I have the page action filled out, I can do a variety of different things with that. So I can actually interact, and I can actually do some marketing automation on that. So why is that useful? The example that I like to use is something like salespeople. So or how you can use a page action to help your salesperson. So for instance, let's just say you have a website and you have a pricing page. And so that, that's a pretty strong buying signal. So if you have somebody who you have as a prospect and they're cookied, and all of a sudden you see them on your pricing page, you might want to create a page action to notify the appropriate salesperson. And because that would be very helpful, because sometimes things happen. So let's give an example. Let's just say that salesperson had been working with a company. He reached out to that prospect and the prospect said, you know what, call me in 6 months because I don't have the budget right now. And when I get my budget, we'll talk then. And the salesperson says, fine. So the salesperson puts it on his calendar and says, I'll call that prospect in 6 months. But all of a sudden, 3 months later, something changed. Maybe his budget changed. Something became an opportunity. So he was now researching. And because you had a page action set up, now your salesperson is notified there's a strong buying signal from this prospect that he's trying to contact. So it's why you would want to have a page action. Here's how you set it up. It's under automations and it's under page actions. And here's just the screenshot. I like to provide these again because I think it helps with the understanding. There's not a lot of screenshots, even if you search online. So I'm trying to provide you that. I found it helpful to understand and learn better. But you just name it. So I just put pricing page as an example here. And then, here's the, your site. So then here's the website. So you basically copy and paste. So what I would do here is I would copy and paste the URL from my website right in here. And then it's asking your page score. So you can say, here's by default, all pages will add 1 point. So it's giving you an option if you want to, like, maybe a pricing page is more important. Maybe a normal website, you just want to give it a 1 point for a click or going there, but maybe a pricing page is more important. So they're giving you option if you want to modify the score. We talked about scoring categories, right? So if you had to attribute something there, you could do that. And then here's the completion action choices. So again, these are all the different things that you could do with a pricing page. So here's the examples. So if somebody goes to my website, I could add a tag. I could say, I could add a tag to that prospect. I could add that prospect to a list. So maybe I have a pricing page list that I add them to, or they get added to a Salesforce campaign, because maybe I had a specific campaign that was driving them there. And now that I see that they went there, I can add them to that campaign. I think one of the most common ones is, like I said, is notify a user or notify the assigned user. So you could notify a specific person. So I could say, anyone who goes to the pricing page, I want to go to Bob, who is the one salesperson that handles any pricing questions. Or you could notify the assigned user. So you could say, I just want whoever is assigned to that prospect to know that, because that's more important, right? If that salesperson is assigned to that prospect, that would be the appropriate person to notify, or maybe it's both. And I see page actions used, like I said, sporadically. I definitely think it's a good idea. I would say it's the one thing marketing can do to help sales. Because when you can notify that salesperson something special that's going on, that's a huge insight, because those salespeople are really hungry trying to, find that next sale and so forth. So, that's a really good way to be a help to your salespeople. Let's see, page actions to work. They, like I said, they must have that Pardot tracking code. So in order for this to work, I needed to put the tracking code on my website. Otherwise, it would not have worked. Completion actions are only applied to prospects. I think I vaguely remember this question somewhere. I can't remember if it was the specialist, but and again, anonymous visitors are not going to, you are not going to be able to pick them up. The other thing that happens too is that they might not be cookied. So you might have, sometimes if you uploaded people from a list, so let's just say there was a trade show and someone came to your booth and you got permission, to use their email. So you're emailing them, but if you get that email from, like I said, an outside source that you just imported, they're not going to be cookied. And if they're not cookied, your page action won't be effective. So that's the one downside of page actions. Like, it's not like just because you have somebody's email that page action works. They're going to need to be cookied as well. And page actions are not applied retroactively. So this is unlike an automation rule. So basically, if I went and put in page action on my website, that means going forward, anyone who actually stops on that website, I would get notified. It's not going to notify me of everybody who was on my website in the past. So you got to think of it as kind of like what happened today, what happens tomorrow, and going forward. And I think it makes sense. So let me just see if there's any questions. Like I said, this section is page actions, and then this section is on. No questions. Hey, Isha, can you put question number 5 on the, there you go, just so, because that's when we do the next
yeah, sure.
quiz question. Awesome. But I'm going to cover custom redirects next. And, and like I said, these will, and then we'll have the last 2 questions. Awesome. So custom redirects. All right, custom redirects allows you to track any link on your website or third-party site. So it basically, if it clicks on the link, it will show up as if any of your prospect clicks on the link, it will show up as an activity on that prospect's profile. So here's how it works. So here's the page. It's under the content tab. It's custom redirects. And you can see you just hit add custom redirect. And then I'm going to make this a little bigger because I can, and here's what you would fill out. So you would simply just name it and put it in the appropriate folder, put it under the correct campaign. And then basically, there's an area here as well for Google Analytics and parameters. So that's kind of how the custom redirect works. I would say that I've seen custom redirects is that, again, let me just go back to how and where you use them. It's again, so here's a good example is that I remember one of my first roles was I was working as a Pardot administrator, and I was working with a client, and they had a newsletter. And they basically always provide the information at the top, but then at the bottom, they provided like all these different restaurants. So they was like, I think they were like a bed and breakfast. It was kind of like a small hotel kind of a thing. So they're like, hey, thank you for staying in our hotel. And if for this time of night, if you're interested in dining, here are some links for some restaurants. If you're interested in a nightclub, here's a nightclub. If you're interested in going outside and doing some outdoor activities, here's some links there. So they always provided those in the newsletter. And one of the things that we did is we created a custom redirect for each one. So we would basically, I would go to the restaurant, and so like where they provided the link to the restaurant, I basically then put that link in here, the destination URL, but then I would name it, Cafe Buca. And so then at the end, when that newsletter was sent, I could see, it helps me track, because I can't track something if I'm taking them from the newsletter. If they're going off to another website, Pardot can't track that. So that's why I would use a custom redirect. And then the custom redirect would tell me who's actually clicking on the link, and then over time, you with the newsletter, you would start to see, okay, lots of people like to do restaurants. They're all clicking to find the best restaurant. Maybe we should expand our restaurant choices. Or you could start to see, okay, boy, it's summertime coming up. We're going to have a lot more outdoor activity choices, so let's put more there, right? So over time, you're going to start to understand where people are clicking. And then again, that's the whole point of personalization, right? You're going to provide better choices based on what people are clicking. And in my example, I would have only been able to do that with a custom redirect. And so, like I said, and the name would just simply be a name that I would want to know so that I could distinguish you know, okay, like I said, the restaurant was Cafe Buca, so I might want to name that the Cafe Buca or Cafe Buca redirect. And if I was going to use the same custom redirect, you know, for the next month, you know, you could actually create another one so that I could distinguish what was one month versus another month, or you could, again, you could use the same custom redirect. It doesn't, well, you'd probably in this case use separate ones, but you would want a naming convention if you wanted to compare across months if that newsletter went out monthly. So again, it really just depends on how you want to use it. But it's all about those custom redirects. They allow you to track any link on your website or a third-party site. Another good example is, like I said, if you are, you know, if you have a link to your Twitter page or a banner ad or on a third-party site, you know, so things that you want to track that you're not able to track with the Pardot tracking. Those are examples of how and when you would want to use custom redirects. There you go. All right, so I do have some quiz questions, but it looks like I put my testing tips up first. Actually, I'm going to come back to that. So let's do the quiz. So everyone get in quiz mode, because I can tell you got to be fast to be able to play with this group. You guys are speedy. Let's look at the questions here too. Yep, so yes, it's recorded. Yep, it's linked. Isha's on it. Thanks. What is a vanity URL? That's, so I'll answer it as the best I can right now. It's hard to answer without, I always like to provide a visual, but a vanity URL, it's in the technical setup. And right now with Pardot, if you don't do any changes in Pardot, what happens is that when you send an email and you have a tracked link, and the user clicks on that link, and if they happen to look up at the URL at the top, they're going to see, it's going to say Go Pardot. And that's the default. That's why you would need a vanity URL. A vanity URL is a custom one that you create so that people feel more comfortable and that they actually know that they're clicking where they need to be. So for instance, if my company is Green Key and they were on the Green Key website and I sent them an email that said Green Key, and in that email I had a click, I would not want to use the Pardot default tracking. I would want to provide a vanity URL so that they would continue to see branding that matched my Green Key. That's why it's really a vanity URL, because the only function it's providing is it's giving people the visual comfort that they're still following along the same branding. They're not getting spun off into some place that makes them go, whoa, I don't know where I just went. I've never heard of this Pardot. I'm just going to get out of here because I don't know what I just clicked on. It's branding of your page URL, and it's unique to the business. So yep, that's a good way to describe it as well. I think you can Google vanity URL, but this is basically, that's covered more in the technical setup section. It may have happened on a previous day. But like I said, I actually provide my contact information as well, so we can actually go through that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to kind of walk you through that. It's hard to understand because basically you do it at setup. I feel like that's one of the reasons why vanity URL is so, like, once you set it up, it gets set up and then that's it. It's done and you don't have to go back to it. You're not using it on a regular basis. So we can go from there. All right, so quiz question, here we go. What is true about page actions? Awesome. Let's see here. Oh, hey, I think I got people. Because actually the true answer is C, and I'm going all the way down. There you go, Deeksha got it.
Deeksha got it again.
Good old Deeksha. So there you go. Awesome. Good for you. There we go. So let's just talk through that, because this is the first one. I actually see a lot more. I see a lot of all of the above. but let me just walk through that. I know it's hard because people are trying to be quick too. But page actions, they're completion actions that are triggered by a form submission, and that's not correct. It's actually when somebody is going to your website that has a page action. Completion actions are applied only to visitors and prospects, and it's only to prospects. It's not visitors, because visitors are anonymous. You have not converted, you do not have their email, and they're not cookied yet. You can apply page actions to any page that contains your Pardot tracking code, and that is true. And then because the previous ones were not, D is not accurate. So the correct answer is C. Good job. Diksha, I think you're ready to take the exam. All right. Let's see here, and whoops. So, and then Isha, can you, the last question. There you go, awesome, perfect, she's on it. Reads my mind. So here's the question C, easy, true or false? I see a lot of common answers. I'm not sure because there's actually it's A or B. So I don't know. We got a lot of. Got it. Thanks. Oops. Hold on. I think I'm going too far. End of. So here we go. End of A. Yep. So that's Lexi. Good job, Lexi. All right. So Lexi got it. So correct. The answer is A. Everybody got A. Maybe there's a B there, but lots of good answers with A. So it's clicks on a custom redirect will show up as an activity on the prospect's profile, and that is true. So obviously if somebody's using or clicks on a custom redirect, you can actually see that. So that's when you go into the prospect, you go under the profile home, and then actually you would be able to pick up the activity there. And then obviously there's automation rules or completion actions that you could do. So, and we already discussed that there's a variety of things that you could do with that as well. Awesome. So here's if anyone is, again, maybe some of you are actually taking the test, maybe some of you are just doing this for general information. So you get a lot of advice, but here's my 3 big points is don't sweat a fail. I failed. I did not pass my Pardot consultant exam the first time. So again, it's common. Remember, I believe you can take the test 6 times. So I mean, you can imagine if you take the test 3 times, you're going to get a very good feel of what's on the test, which is only going to make you study or make you even better at it. My philosophy is that once you start studying, don't stop until you pass. It's easy to say, oh my God, I've been studied. I'm going to take a break now for a while. And I would say don't. I would say keep studying because anything you can build on is iterative. Because if you stop studying, you're going to have to relearn and refresh on, remember what, and then you get busy. So a lot of times when I take the exam, I give myself a pretty good runway. So I'll think about, I'm going to probably take my exam on this date, but I know even after that, if I don't pass, I still am going to have time. So I would encourage, if your schedule allows, is that once you start studying for it, you just got to be a pit bull and just keep going after it. After you take the test, write down all the types of questions that you remember. That gives you an idea of the topics and types of the questions on the exam. And I guess I've taken more exams, so I do have 6 different certifications as well as a Marketo one, and I use this for all of them. So if for some reason, because you find out instantly, you took the test, you check to see if you passed. If you didn't, I would basically just go back into my car and I would start writing down the questions that I remembered. And that it's not, I don't think that's cheating because that's what you saw. But it's not about the exact questions. It would be things like, I remember the grading questions because I remember getting a question about Pardot grading and I understood the definition of grading and what it was, but the questions were more, they were more specific on like an application of the knowledge. And so I knew that I had to study it differently. And so then when I took the test the second time, I was prepared for that type of question. So again, just those are my 3 testing tips, and hopefully it helped me and hopefully that can help you as well. Also, here's my information. I'm probably more active on LinkedIn, but I'm on Twitter as well. But tell me how you did. Like, so if you end up taking the test, I mean, I'm only one person, and I know there's a lot of different people that are helping you as well. I'd love to hear it, like, hey, I did it, or if you have a follow-up question, or because honestly, like there were times where I had questions and I'm like, I didn't know how to figure it out. And it's really helpful to talk through it with someone because, you know, I'm in Pardot all the time. And if I can't help you, I know I should be able to, but even if I can't, I can put you in the right place as well with someone who's familiar with it. So I'd love to hear from you and tell me how you did. And from that, I just wanted to say thank you, but let's go and do we got to do the fun part, which is who won. So hang on, guys, because we're going to do I got to put the names in here. So this is basically a spreadsheet I created. I got Diksha, and then I've got, this is me putting your name in a hat virtually. And then I've got Diksha again, because Diksha was pretty active. Okay, so I've never done this before, so just bear with me. So basically, and here, and the orange here is basically a formula, and it's a randomizer. And so I'm gonna just practice here now, so this doesn't count. So you can see, oh gosh, it's gotta work. Come on now here. Yeah. It changes. Might be because my internet's a little slow here too. All right. So basically, I'm going to start now. So basically, it's a random generate based on the names that I put. So this is like my hat, and these are the names in the hat. And I'm going to take the fourth generated name, and the fourth name that appears. So this is not right. Diksha's obviously has a very good chance. But then you can email me at this, and I will give you the voucher for being a good participant and listening to my session. And the voucher is good for, I believe it's for an entire cost of an exam. So it's a good deal, and it expires in June of 2021. So you got a lot of leeway. So if anyone's taking the exam, so this is also just fun for me to watch. Just entertains me. So here we go. We're going to take the fourth generated name. So, oh, come on here now. Oh, it was working. There he goes. Lexi's 1, Diksha's 2, Viknesh is 3, and Diksha 1. So not a surprise. We did see Vikesh and Lexi show up as well, but Diksha, if you could email me, this is my email, and then I will follow up. I think there's actually a form that you need to fill out, and then they will submit a voucher for you. But I had a great time, you guys. Thanks for having me. It was fun to go through it, and I wish I could see you guys all in person. It looked like you had a really good group, but good luck with everything.
Thanks, Jen. That was so amazing of you. And congrats, Diksha, for winning a voucher. It was really fun, like not only learnings, but learning with joy is always fun. And that was an incredible session with a lot of learnings, with a lot of automations that we learned. And thank you so much. Do you like to say anything else to our trailblazers out there?
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Tomorrow, we have Andrea with day 4 presentation. And stay tuned for the more amazing content coming up. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for giving out time for our trailblazers and delivering all your expertise. Thank you so much. Have a great day,
All right.
everybody.
Take care. Yep. Bye.